This episode is brought to you by Standard Deviant Brewing. Be sure to check out all of their Beer Week events at the 14th Street Tap Room, as well as venues throughout the city. Highlights include a 5K beer run through the Mission, a dog portrait night, a Carrot Saison release featuring local legendary band The Carrots, and get this, a collaborative IPA made with Muni and SF City Football Club launching this Friday, February 21st. That beer will be featured at bars throughout the city. Hop on Muni for a week-long bar crawl to win special Muni and Standard Deviant prizes. Standard Deviant Brewing, located at 280 14th Street, makers of the coldest tasting beer in SF since 2016. If you'd like to advertise on Storied San Francisco, please contact us at storiedsf@gmail.com.
Right before you arrived, I realized I was trying to schedule something, and I realized that February 5th is a Wednesday and March 5th is a Wednesday, and I got weirdly excited about that.
They're aligned this year because
Yeah.
it's not a leap year, so yeah.
It was such a dumb thing to feel good about, but it was I felt excited that I just could notice that.
That was comedian/union organizer Nato Green. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast about artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city so special. In this episode, meet and get to know Nato. Born and raised in the city, Nato bounced between two hills in his youth, Noe and Bernal. Hear how this shy kid discovered comic books on 23rd Street in the Mission, and how that and getting into comedy clubs when he was in 8th grade shaped his life. Here's Nato Green.
So, let's go back. I come from Eastern European Jews who came to this country in the early 20th century and settled in Chicago. So my parents are from Chicago and the Chicago suburbs. And my parents got married, I think, in 1968 and moved to San Francisco.
Okay. That's an interesting time to move here.
Yeah. And they were my parents were in the counterculture, but bad at it. Do you know what I mean?
No, tell me.
There were a lot of Joan Baez and Holly Near records in my house growing up.
Okay.
There was a lot of beaded things, but my parents didn't do drugs particularly. I think they tried to do drugs a little bit before I was born, and it didn't take. Drugs just don't agree with some people. So my parents were more, were sort of more in the kind of there were politics. I used to joke, I didn't see a fully clothed adult until I was 9. There was hot tubs, there were naked adults around. So when I was born, my parents lived in right over there, actually, on the opposite hill. In Noe Valley at what was then Army and Castro.
Right.
It was a street that was a cul-de-sac at both ends. And at the time, when I was a little kid, now Noe Valley's super fancy, but my parents worked in public schools, and our neighbors worked at the grocery store and the post office and were carpenters, and there was still Noe Valley had a strata of blue collar, Irish and Italian families that went back, and my parents were sort of the wave of 70s counterculture that moved in on top of that. And
that was the first place they landed?
Yeah.
Well,
I think there were a couple other, they lived in the Castro briefly, but the house that they lived in when I was born was there. And
were you there first only? Where do you fall, birth order, all that stuff?
I have a younger brother.
Okay, so you were there first.
Yes.
So they did not have kids.
Correct.
Prior to coming here.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was a weird old house that had been sort of grafted together, and then my brother was born when I was 5, and my parents split up when I was in middle school, and my dad and I moved first to 22nd and Dolores,
Okay.
and then
Another hill, right?
no,
Oh, no, that's down. That's down,
It's
right?
a flat bit.
Right.
It goes up on either side.
Yes.
And then we were there very briefly, and then moved here up to Bernal.
Okay.
And so most of my childhood was going back and forth between my mom's house in what became Cesar Chavez and my dad's house on the east side of Bernal. And again, Bernal at that time, like, it wasn't especially fancy. I mean, not even like when I was a kid, there was much more like big like chunks of Bernal that were unpaved.
Oh, wow. Fun in the rain.
Or like, now like Bernal has, I think, 43 public stairways. And there were these weird like cuts between blocks and stuff. And now they're like these, community gardens and whatnot. And then they were just like wilds.
Right.
So anyway, that was the neighborhoods I grew up in. And so, I've gone away briefly a couple times, but almost my entire life within 2 miles of where we're sitting.
Right. Yeah. You ended up one of the main places you grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you comfortable saying your exact age, or do you want to do a decade kind of thing?
No, that's fine. Next month I turn 50.
Okay, 50.
In March, yeah.
Okay. So you grew up in the 70s.
I was a kid
80s.
in the 70s. I was born in the 70s. Like there were I have some early childhood memories that subsequent cultural exposure allowed me to attach dates to.
Right.
So like I remember the Milk Moscone assassination.
Okay.
And the White Night
You
riots.
were pretty young.
Yeah, I was really young.
Yeah.
And the White Night riots and Dianne Feinstein becoming mayor. And I remember the gay pride parades in the late 70s
Okay.
and early 80s. All the naked people in
Going
the
to
leather.
them, or?
Yeah, attending.
Yeah.
With my parents.
You did not attend the assassination, I'm assuming. So some of that shit was like TV memories, kind of?
Or like seeing newsstands, or like the grown-ups around me freaking out about something, or so yeah, I remember all that. And then at some point I read Season of the Witch.
Okay. Very good book.
And I would like, it filled in some things. I was like, that's what that was about, So
yeah, Jonestown being one of them, or like, did you have or do you have weird like recollections of anything around that? Or?
I don't think I remember Jonestown when it happened.
Yeah.
There was like a run of like 49ers triumphs, like Joe Montana,
80s.
Dwight Clark.
Yes.
So like I wasn't a football fan, but I remember all the excitement around that and the rioting and the screaming and all that.
The thing that happens. Okay, so I want to hear. So now we've talked about where you grew up and some things that are vague memories, but I want to hear like schools you went to, what kind of shit you were doing when you weren't in school, what kind of kid you were, what kind of son you were, what kind of brother you were.
I was a bad brother.
Okay, let's dig into that.
Dismissive and neglectful older brother of my younger brother, who was 5 years younger than me. I went to Rooftop Elementary School, which was in Twin Peaks, and then I went to Martin Luther King Middle School in the Portola. So there was, I think in the 70s, the NAACP sued California for just race discrimination in San Francisco public schools.
Okay.
And so there's a big period of time where San Francisco School District was under a consent decree, court-ordered desegregation program. There was under the oversight of the judge. And so for most of my childhood, that was what my dad was working on. My dad worked for the school district for 35 years.
Like administrator type? Or
at different points, he started out as a classroom teacher. And then, so I also, like when we talk about memories, I remember being on the picket line with him when the teachers union went on strike in 1979.
Okay.
And then he became like a program administrator working on the implementation of the consent decree programs. And so Martin Luther King was sort of one of the first wave of desegregation schools. And then that was middle school. And then I got a scholarship and went to Lick Wilmerding, a private high school.
Okay.
And
is desegregation, is that the same thing as, or is busing part of that?
Yeah, I mean, busing is part of it, and part of it is also like superseding preference order,
right?
So that like you couldn't pick your neighborhood school. That certain people from some neighborhoods got preference in school choice,
right?
So
early DEI, which is the buzzword now, causes airplanes to crash. I guess. Anyway,
it caused the LA wildfires.
Fires,
too.
Yeah.
So that was, and I was like, sensitive, depressed kid.
Okay.
Read a lot, was really into comic books. I went around the block with like role playing games. And I was to locate it in time. So being about to turn, I'm 50. I graduated high school in 93. And so when I was in high school, the local music scene was the thrash funk scene.
Yes.
Of which the main sort of surviving like standard bearer is Primus. But there were like all these bands. And so like, so I was like going to shows at the Omni and the Stone and stuff, and then mad that I couldn't go to the 21 and over venues,
right?
All the time.
Oh yeah.
So, and I was hanging out. There used to be, so it used to be that the first, I think the first independent comic book store was on 23rd Street.
I was just going to ask about those kinds of stores.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a thing. Like you would go, you had your stores that you went to, and there were stores all over the city, and then I went to different stores for different things, and then so there was a comic book store at 23rd on 23rd between Mission and Valencia.
Okay.
And then there was like, they opened a second store a few doors down, and then they split, and so then there were like, so there was the SF Comic Company, and then 2 doors down was Scott's Comics and Cards, and so
like cells dividing.
Yeah,
yeah.
Or I mean,
something
Protestantism.
Oh yeah.
Who's to say?
So
I hung out at Scott's. Like I became a Scott's loyalist, and like there were some other people who like hung out at Scott's all the time, or were like regulars, and that was like hanging out at Scott's was my life. And so when I was in high school, the next door to Scott's on 23rd Street was a Victorian, and the band the Limbo Maniacs lived there.
Okay.
That was, and like one of the things about the thrash funk scene of that time period is that a bunch of those bands got record deals, but they sort of never broke through.
Never took off, yeah.
Because it's like what I've read about the like DC go-go scene. It was such a like live energy, and the studio album sort of never captured how bananas those live shows were. So and so like occasionally there'll be like a reunion show, and it's a bunch of dudes my age and older,
yes.
Because like that music never connected with the younger generation. That where there was like college students who came around to it, a generation later.
Because it wasn't on like CDs and
right.
the radio.
Like
or
in
whatever.
fact, I would so like Primus.
MySpace.
Primus every year does a New Year's show.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
And they just had the Limbo Maniacs like reunited to open for them at the Fox Theater, and so then I was like, I went to look for the Limbo Maniacs. They had one album. And it's not even on Spotify. And I was talking to, had been talking to the bass player a few years ago, and he was like, yeah, we the late, it was like on Island Records, that was bought by Warner Brothers, that was bought by Sony, or something. It was like, it just got handed around. And he was like, we wanted to figure out how to get the rights back to reissue a 20th anniversary edition.
Yep.
And like couldn't even figure out who to talk to like who could approve that sort of thing. It was just like lost in the
corporate shuffle.
Yeah.
Something.
So
that's annoying.
Yeah. So Limbos lived next door. And so again, this is like to locate it
to Scott's
Comics on 23rd Street.
Got it.
And so I want to say it was the 91 Super Bowl, the 49ers versus the Broncos.
Okay.
And Steve Young, again, like I'm aware of it. I didn't know, but the 49ers won like this blowout, very lopsided victory. Mm-hmm. And the Limomaniacs pushed guitar amps onto the windowsills and started playing guitar, and they were having a party. And so all these like rock skater dudes spilled out of their house. And because we were at 23rd and Mission, a bunch of cholos spilled out of whatever they were buildings they were in. And then there was like a big mosh pit in the middle of the street at 23rd and Mission.
Yeah.
And that was super fun.
Yeah.
So I didn't care about the football, but I was ready for the moshing.
I don't want to say it doesn't happen anymore. I mean, the last time the Giants won was 14, I think, and some of that shit was happening, but it wasn't like it was. I mean, I wasn't here in the 90s, but
yeah, I mean,
that sounds dangerous and fun and fucked up. And
yeah, I mean, I also like
community and spontaneous.
This is like, I mean, to be like perhaps overly corny about it, like at some point, like when they turned Blind Spotting into a TV series, I heard an interview with those guys, and they described the experience of being from the Bay as one of overlapping code switching, and I like so identified with that.
Yeah.
Of just because of the nature of what it is to grow up here, at least in my generation, like the number of communities that you have some comfort and familiarity with. That are all on top of each other.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, the Mission isn't too far. So, but I'm wondering, like, did you walk down there? Did you go to other neighborhoods? Did you take Muni? Did you ride a bike? Like, how did you get around when you got around?
Never rode a bike. We lived up here, and I hung on the Mission, and going to school, high school, like Riverding, which was on Ocean Avenue. Typically, I would take Bart back to 24th Street and then wait for the 67 bus to take me up the hill. And
Cortland, right?
The 67 bus, it sort of loops around to Cortland, but I would take it up to the top of like Bernal Heights Boulevard, and Powhatan, just above Cortland, and then walk down. And 67 bus never came.
Right.
So I would sit down and lean against the curve on the BART, thing.
Oh, the banked wall kind of thing. Yeah.
Like the big hole where you go into the BART station. Is curved, and I would like sit down and sleep and wait for the bus. So I spent like every day after school napping at the corner of 24th and Mission, waiting for the bus. So, and walking around, taking the bus, all about the 24 and the 49 and the 67. That was my life. And the 24 went back and forth between my dad's house and my mom's house.
It goes up through Noe.
Yeah. And then one of my best friends lived in the Lower Haight, and he had a car, so I'd take the bus over there, and then
was he your like I always think about, I had a few older friends right around like late middle school, early high school, like the first one to get a car. It was like everything changed.
Yeah, well, just like one of us had a car. Like
that's what I mean.
Like one of the guys. He wasn't even the oldest one. He just like his parents could let him have a car. So. And then
did y'all take advantage of that? Like, did you start going different places? Or
he would like come. I mean, he would like come around and pick us all up, and because there was like 4 of us that we hung out together all the time, and 2 of them were on the west side of the city, and so he would like there was a route, of him coming to pick us up, and then we would like go sit in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
There used to be, I don't know if it still exists, there was a magazine called Cups that has become more corporate.
Okay.
But like when we were in high school, it was like a zine, like a San Francisco's coffee house scene.
Oh, shit.
And so there were points where like once upon a time it was physically possible to get a cup of coffee at every coffee house in the city in a weekend.
Oh, wow.
And so we would like be like, fuck it, we have nothing to do this weekend. Let's just like do the cup circuit. We'd like figure out a route to like go to every place.
I love that. And this is like high school still?
High school and like immediately post high school, but mostly high school.
Yeah, I feel like there's those kinds of people. I think I'm one of them who do start drinking coffee early, and then there's the people who don't. Like it's like a fork in the road of growing up. It's like, and I still to this day drink a lot of coffee. Anyway, I don't think I've had San Francisco 90s coffee culture on the podcast yet. So
yeah, I mean there was like we went a lot like we had our favorite spots.
Do you want to name drop some of them?
Sure, I'll name drop some of them, and I'll tell you what is there now. So
yes, please.
One of the favorite spots was Farley's, which is still there on 18th Street.
Like Flying Spaghetti Monster. It's still there. I love it.
There's an era of the journals that we're deep in. Like he had Roger, the owner, had these journals, and guests could write in them, and so he would. So there was a number of years where, my friends and I were writing in the journals. So Farley's, Higher Grounds at the corner of Diamond and Chenery, in Glen Park. That's
still there?
Still there. And then for a while there was a second Higher Grounds at 16th and Guerrero.
That's the one I'm more familiar with.
That closed.
Yes.
And then also Cafe Macondo, where Gestalt is now.
Yeah.
That was like, loved that place. It was like a lefty, like Latin American coffee shop.
Sounds great.
And I remember, like there was, like we were hanging out at Cafe Macondo all the time. And then there was an article in the Chronicle about like, San Francisco's neo-beatnik scene emerges in the Mission. And we were like, God damn it, it's done.
Right, it's over. Neo-beatnik.
Like, because there was like people doing spoken word poetry, and there was like the acid jazz stuff, like Charlie Hunter and the Brown Fellinis, and Alphabet Soup, these like jazz hip hop crossover bands. So that was like as soon as we turned 21, we were going to see that stuff a lot.
Were you doing any poetry performance of any kind? You mentioned the journals at Farley's. Like, were you writing? What did y'all write? What did you write in them?
Just nonsense. Just angst. Angst. It was teen angst and like, heavily like, Jello Biafra influenced ranting.
Okay.
And, don't meet your heroes.
Okay.
But I
did like his segue cameo, I guess you could say, in Last Black Man.
Sure.
That was fun. Like, okay, cool.
I did at some point I did a event with him, and so I got to meet him, and he just like held forth, like just telling you how it is, and seemed to be completely unable to like decipher normal social cues of like, well, it's getting late, like that kind of stuff. I gotta be getting going,
especially if you don't have a watch,
right? Like, he just kept going, and I was like, this motherfucker just must be used to people getting up and walking away while he's talking.
Just doesn't faze him.
Yeah, so
interesting.
I just I had to break out.
Yeah,
So,
but in addition to, I guess, writing in that journal, like, what were you doing? Anything expressive?
I wasn't performing. So what did I say? Farley's, Higher Ground, Macondo, and then on the other side of the city, we were going to the Blue Danube on Clement Street. Yeah. And
definitely still there.
Definitely still there. And the Horseshoe in the Lower Haight.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Yeah.
I think so.
yeah.
I didn't see it the other day.
Um,
Or in a
and,
while, but.
I mean, that was sort of the main spots. And then, but then I was also, like, I wasn't doing performing, but I had started hanging out at comedy clubs in 8th grade.
Okay.
And so,
You're like 13, 14, so this is late-ish 80s?
yeah, so 8th grade is 88, 89.
Okay.
Okay, so
Which clubs and who were you seeing?
okay, so here's what happened. At the time, in that time period, there was on KQED television, there was a TV show called Comedy Tonight. It was like, you know, those stand-up showcases where there'd be like a stand-up show on television that has 3 comics in half an hour or whatever. It was that, but it was all local comics, and it was filmed in San Francisco.
Amazing.
So initially it was filmed at a place called Wolfgang's, which is now where Cobb's is.
Okay.
And then they moved it to the Great American Musical.
Oh, nice.
So I was like watching local comics on KQED. Alex Bennett was on the radio on Live 105 doing the morning show with a live audience and just had local comics on hanging out. And Comedy Day in the Park at the time was drawing 50,000 people to the polo fields.
Wow.
So, because at the time there were 5 7-night a week, like full-time comedy clubs within the city limits.
Yeah.
And then another 5 in the greater Bay Area. So like, and there wasn't, people could make a living as a regional headliner, basically. So
It's kind of like a West Coast second city. Is that crazy to say? In the sense that like there's so many comics that come from here.
yeah,
They might not stay here.
yeah.
They might not
I mean,
end up here, but like
at one point I like put together a spot of like, I feel like people talk about the Chicago scene and the, like, you know, like comics that come from different places. And I think people don't realize how many comics are from here or like did time here.
yeah.
And so I made a Spotify playlist
Nice.
called Bay Area Comedy Remains Undefeated, which is something that
Yes.
Kanao and I have said to each other over the years.
Yes.
So just because people, like, of all the comics who are either from here or spend time here.
Did you hear about or watch Ali Wong's acceptance speech for some award she won at the Golden Globes?
Yeah, and she shouted out the punchline in Mali.
Yeah, my wife and I were watching that. We're like, finally, she's talking about San Francisco. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so going back to when you started. You said 8th grade.
So all this stuff is happening. So comedy's around San Francisco. Like if you're an 8th grader at home, like it's not hard for comedy to get on your radar.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so then my 8th grade science teacher, his roommate was the doorman at Cobb's.
Oh shit.
And so I mentioned to him that I was into it, and he started taking me to the clubs. So I started, and the so I had visited over the years. Every once in a while, I went to the Punchline or the Other Cafe, which was at Cole and Carl on the corner, where I think there's a Grapevine there now.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I missed the Holy City Zoo entirely. I was aware of it, but never went inside. And then
That's the one on Clement, right?
Next to Clement Street.
Next to Neck of the Woods. It's something.
Yeah.
It's not that anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
The Dursts own the name.
Okay.
So, and then there was an Improv for a while where Biscuits and Blues is now.
Okay.
And Punchline and Cobb's. And so because of Peter the doorman, I was going to Cobb's. And so
In the 8th grade.
starting in 8th grade.
Okay,
yeah.
shit.
And so in the pink section in the Chronicle, there would be like a strip ad for Cobb's, and it would say it was a 2-drink minimum, but it would say 2 for 1 Sunday through Thursday.
Okay.
And so I was like clipping it out, and my buddy with the car, and we were going to Cobb's all the time. And so, you know, seeing Greg Proops and Dana Gould and Paula Poundstone and Mark Pitta and Johnny Steele and Will Durst and Greg Barrett and
they were all pretty young back then.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, probably maybe 30s,
Right.
20s, 30s.
Yeah, I mean, it was like there were some people that I got to watch become headliners. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I got to see. I mean, the like it felt like watching adults. You know what I mean? Like it felt like watching an older generation.
Sure.
That were like, hey, remember when we were kids? And it wasn't shit that I related to. And then the first people that I felt like were close enough to my reality that I felt like I really connected with were Arj Barker and Margaret Cho.
That was Nato Green. On the next episode, we hear about Nato making his way onto the stage and what he's been up to since his 20s. Part 2 drops next Tuesday, wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Our contributing producer is Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 7th season, we have more than 220 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If possible, please rate and review the show. I want to know what you think. Follow us on Instagram and Threads at storiedsf, and reach out to us there or email us at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Be extra careful crossing the street. And keep being wacky, creative, and kind out there. See you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.